Have you ever completely drained your own physical health, entirely depleted your bank account, and violently shattered your own mental peace, desperately trying to save a highly toxic, deeply broken person who absolutely refuses to actively save themselves? We are falsely conditioned to deeply believe that our unconditional, endless empathy and massive, heavily sacrificing love will eventually cure the toxic people in our lives. But the terrifying psychological reality is that you cannot violently drag a person out of a burning house when they are the exact one actively holding the matches. Before we dive into today's life-changing lesson on the incredibly dangerous, completely devastating psychological trap of the toxic savior complex, please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you these powerful stories. In the highly intellectual, deeply respected medical district of a massive ancient empire, there lived an incredibly gifted, fiercely empathetic young healer named Julian, who possessed a breathtaking, legendary ability to brew extremely rare, highly potent, golden elixirs. Julian had completely dedicated his entire massive, beautiful existence to desperately healing his oldest childhood friend, a deeply arrogant, highly self-destructive nobleman named Silas, who entirely refused to stop drinking a highly addictive, completely lethal black poison. Every single time Silas violently collapsed in the dirty, muddy streets, completely entirely consumed by the deadly toxins he willingly chose to drink, Julian would frantically rush to his side, desperately aggressively abandoning all of his other highly paying patients. Julian would violently sacrifice his own premium, highly essential physical health, aggressively staying awake for 7 agonizing days and freezing nights to meticulously brew the incredibly expensive, highly rare golden elixir required to entirely pull Silas back from the absolute brink of permanent death. He deeply foolishly believed that if he just successfully saved Silas one more massive, incredibly painful time, the incredibly broken nobleman would finally deeply realize the massive, undeniable value of his own life and completely change his highly toxic, deeply self-destructive behavior. But the terrifying, dark psychological reality of human nature is that Silas did not actually want to be permanently cured. He simply wanted to loudly enjoy the deeply chaotic, highly thrilling high of his dark poison, without ever having to actually face the massive, brutal consequences of his own terrible choices. The exact moment Julian's glowing, golden elixir finally cleared the dark poison from his heavily failing lungs, Silas immediately laughed, entirely ignored the young healer's desperate, highly emotional pleading, and aggressively walked directly back into the dark tavern to heavily drink the exact same lethal poison all over again. Completely shattered, physically coughing up dark blood from his own massive, heavily unappreciated exhaustion, Julian collapsed on the cold stone floor of his medical clinic, deeply sobbing as he finally realized that his incredibly beautiful, massive empathy was actively killing him. From the dark, smoky shadows of the ancient medical library, a heavily scarred, incredibly feared master surgeon who had silently watched the entire tragic, deeply pathetic cycle unfold slowly stepped forward, looking at Julian with an incredibly piercing, terrifyingly cold stare. You are frantically emptying your own deeply precious, highly vital life force to completely refill the cup of a deeply arrogant man who has intentionally drilled a massive, Gaping hole entirely through the absolute bottom of his own glass, the master surgeon growled with a heavy, deeply commanding voice. The master brutally explained that deeply toxic, highly self-destructive people absolutely do not want a brilliant, beautiful savior to entirely fix their broken lives. They desperately want an incredibly weak, highly submissive enabler to actively fund their chaotic, entirely toxic lifestyle. When you constantly, aggressively rush in to completely erase the massive, highly painful consequences of their own deeply flawed choices, you are actively stealing their absolute only terrifying opportunity to actually hit the brutal, rock-bottom reality required to truly change their own lives. Julian felt a massive psychological shockwave completely shatter his pathetic, desperate savior complex, instantly realizing that his intense need to perfectly rescue Silas was not actually an act of pure, massive love, but a highly toxic, entirely codependent chain actively destroying both of their lives. The very next evening, when the desperate, heavily frantic messengers violently kicked down Julian's wooden door, aggressively screaming that Silas had intentionally poisoned himself again and desperately required the expensive golden elixir, Julian did something absolutely, profoundly terrifying. Instead of frantically running to the boiling cauldrons, Julian calmly sat in his heavy wooden chair, perfectly locked his cold, unblinking eyes onto the screaming messengers, and entirely refused to brew a single pathetic drop of his highly premium, incredibly rare medicine. When Silas finally miraculously survived the agonizing, deeply painful withdrawal completely on his own, he aggressively stormed into Julian's clinic with a bright red face, violently throwing heavy medical books and desperately screaming about how Julian had cruelly, selfishly betrayed his massive loyalty. But Julian simply looked at the desperately thrashing, highly toxic man with an entirely blank, completely cold, absolutely terrifying indifference, entirely refusing to raise his voice, entirely refusing to aggressively explain himself, and showing absolutely zero emotional reaction to the pathetic, screaming victim. My deeply premium, highly expensive medicine is strictly reserved for people who actively want to desperately live, Julian replied with a highly authentic, deeply chilling calm, and I absolutely refuse to ever fund your pathetic, deeply selfish suicide again. This dark, incredibly aggressive psychological story holds an absolutely urgent, deeply life-altering truth for anyone currently trapped in the highly toxic, completely exhausting cycle of deeply over-functioning for partners, family members, or friends who entirely refuse to actively help themselves. You must fundamentally understand that extreme, unconditional empathy without highly aggressive, heavily enforced boundaries is absolutely not a beautiful, glowing virtue. It is a highly dangerous, incredibly submissive form of psychological self-harm that will actively leave you completely destroyed. When you constantly, fiercely dive into the dark, freezing ocean to desperately save someone who actively loves violently drowning, they will absolutely not suddenly realize how incredibly valuable you are. They will simply aggressively pull you deeply underwater until you completely suffocate alongside them. Stop desperately handing out your incredibly expensive, highly premium emotional rescue boats to highly toxic people who intentionally, aggressively drill massive holes in the absolute bottom of their own fragile ships. The absolute highest form of psychological respect you can ever actively practice is the cold, terrifyingly powerful ability to completely let highly self-destructive people violently crash into the heavy, painful brick wall of their own terrible, deeply flawed decisions. If someone actively shows you that they completely lack the basic, fundamental desire to aggressively improve their own highly toxic life, you must completely believe their chaotic actions the very first time, totally withdraw your massive healing energy, and confidently walk away. True, undeniable power is completely recognizing that you are the absolute ultimate master of your own incredible peace, and absolutely refusing to ever play the deeply exhausting, completely pathetic role of a collateral victim in someone else's desperate war against their own soul. The exact moment you boldly decide to completely stop desperately saving deeply broken people who do not actually want to be fixed is the exact moment you violently reclaim the massive, undeniable steering wheel of your own incredible, highly unstoppable destiny. You must eagerly learn to completely fall in love with the highly intimidating, absolutely liberating power of totally dropping the massive, exhausting burden of other people's deeply unhealed, completely toxic trauma. Let them violently complain about your highly aggressive boundaries. Let them loudly gossip about your intense, unapologetic emotional detachment. And let them desperately create entirely fake narratives to rapidly soothe their own massive, unhealed, deep internal insecurities. While they are entirely obsessed with angrily trying to forcefully demand your deeply valuable, highly premium rescue services, you will be deeply focused on aggressively building your own massive, undeniably brilliant, highly untouchable future completely free from their chaotic drama. Take a massive, incredibly deep breath today. Forcefully drop the heavy, highly exhausting medical bag of the desperate savior. Completely detach your premium energy from deeply toxic parasites, and aggressively step into the highly intimidating, deeply authentic power of completely saving yourself first. Master the terrifying, completely invincible art of allowing deeply irresponsible people to fully experience the massive, agonizing consequences of their own actions, strictly refusing to negotiate your immense, unique worth with people who actively treat you like an unpaid emotional servant. Your incredibly unapologetic, deeply authentic peace of mind is your absolute greatest, most heavily guarded psychological weapon. Aggressively keep it highly protected, violently keep it completely uncompromising, and absolutely never be afraid to fiercely use it to protect your own massive life. Reclaim your absolute power today. Completely ignore their desperate, pathetic screams for you to instantly rescue them, and confidently build the massively successful, deeply peaceful reality that perfectly aligns with your own undeniable, heavy soul. Stay completely cold to their cheap, highly toxic manipulation. Stay incredibly focused on your own massive emotional health, and let your absolute, terrifying detachment be the loudest, most devastating statement you ever actually make. If you found true value in this dark, psychological lesson and learned something incredibly important about the true, devastating danger of the savior complex today, please hit that like button. Leave a comment below about your own journey and subscribe to the channel for more powerful life lessons.